Hey there. Tonight, we're not boarding a merchant vessel or exploring a royal court. We're waking up in the worst possible place. The dark, blood-stained deck of Blackbeard's ship. The Queen Anne's Revenge. The year is 1717, and you've just been pressed into service as a pirate, whether you wanted it or not. If stories like this help you unwind at the end of the day, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it genuinely brings you peace. And I'm always curious. Drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing how far these stories travel, from late-night listeners in Tokyo to early morning commuters in London. So take a breath, maybe grab some water or tea, dim the lights if you can, and settle in. This is going to be a long, brutal journey. Let's see if you can survive a week aboard the most feared pirate ship in history. Now, you open your eyes. It's not the soft, familiar dawn of your village or the bunk of the honest merchant ship you once served. This darkness is thick, heavy, and smells aggressively of stale rum, unwashed canvas, and something vaguely metallic, something you instinctively know is dried blood. This isn't your bed. This is the dark, damp, splintered deck of a ship you do not know. Something is very wrong. Your head pounds with a dull, throbbing ache, a souvenir from the blunt force that ended your former life as a respectable sailor. You feel the constant, nauseating movement of a massive vessel, deep in the trough of a swell. The air is thick, hot, and impossible to breathe deeply. Your hands are tied loosely, not with tight rope, but enough to remind you that you are a captive, not a passenger. You can hear the low, throaty laughter of men nearby, punctuated by the creak of the hull and the slosh of bilge water far below. The situation is revealed. You are a captured merchant sailor or an unwilling press-ganged recruit. The year is 1717. You are below decks on the Queen Anne's Revenge, and your captain is the most feared name on the sea, Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard. The stakes are immediate and absolute. You are now governed by a code of anarchy. Failure means death, by disease in the squalor below decks, by cannonball in the next battle, or by the slow, painful judgment of the pirate code. Most common men lasted only a few months in this life before succumbing to sickness or the sea. The grim reality is that your chances of survival are astronomically low. Your journey has just begun. Can you survive the constant danger, the lethal diseases, and the psychological anarchy of a life with no law? Let's see if you can make it through the first week without earning the notice of the man with the fused black match cords burning in his beard. Settle in. We will explore the terrifying hierarchy, the reality of the food and water, the constant threat of the Royal Navy, and the final, brutal end waiting for all pirates. But first, you must learn the lawlessness that passes for law on the pirate ship. The first light of dawn is a blinding, brutal shift, filtering through the main hatch and revealing the grim chaos of the gun deck. The air is foul, thick with the smell of sweat, stale gunpowder, and the inevitable stench of human waste that pools somewhere below you. You manage to sit up, instantly drawing the cold, dismissive gaze of a man polishing a pistol nearby. You realize sharply that you are the lowest form of life on this ship. A newcomer, an outsider, a potential liability. Your first task is to survive the social order, which is far more complex than simple chaos. You are now immersed in the terrifying world of the pirate code. You expected a ship of unhinged, screaming maniacs, but what you observe instead is a chilling, pragmatic order. Pirates were often men who despised the brutal discipline and poor wages of the Royal Navy or merchant service. On a pirate ship, they sought a distorted form of democracy, codified by strict articles that every man was expected to sign or swear to. These articles are the true spine of the ship's discipline, and you realize that understanding them is your only defense. You learn that the pirate code is less about lawlessness and more about immediate, absolute accountability. The articles dictate the rules of battle, the division of plunder, and the specific punishments for every infraction. One article, you hear muttered, states that every man has a vote in matters of moment. Another states that all plunder is to be divided equally, with extra shares only for the captain, the quartermaster, the master, and the boatswain. You thought capitalism was ruthless. Try a system where the punishment for stealing from a shipmate is marooning, being left on a deserted island with a bottle of water and a loaded pistol for a quicker end. You quickly realize that the man who rules your immediate life is not Blackbeard, the captain, but the quartermaster. The captain is king in battle and in pursuit, commanding the helm and the guns. But the quartermaster governs everything else: the food, the discipline, the assignments, and the sharing of the plunder. This unexpected democracy is both a relief and a threat. It means that the most brutal man on the ship won't necessarily be your master. It might be the most quietly organized one. The quartermaster, you observe, carries an air of cold, bureaucratic authority, often mediating disputes over stolen playing cards or broken watches. You realize that appealing to the quartermaster is your best path to resolving minor conflicts, provided you can do so silently and respectfully. You are shoved to your feet and put to work. There are no gentle introductions. Your arms are untied, and a mop, a filthy swab, is thrust into your hands. Your initial duty is to clean the gun deck. The grime is astonishing. It's a mix of sea salt, vomit, dried blood, and rat droppings. The smell is so foul, it makes the stale rum scent almost appealing. You quickly learn the topography of the ship, the crowded forecastle for common sailors, the slightly cleaner quarterdeck for officers, and the treacherous, damp ladderways between them. You must be present when needed and utterly invisible otherwise. The physical strain starts immediately. The constant dizzying motion of the ship forces your muscles to work constantly just to remain vertical, and the air is stifling. You wipe sweat from your face, realizing that the heat below decks is a constant, suffocating reality. Your lungs ache with every shallow breath. You feel the hunger gnawing. Your first ration is a piece of hard tack, a biscuit baked so hard it could break teeth, and a mouthful of thin, warm, slightly brackish water. You stare at the biscuit. You'd kill for a piece of sourdough right now. Instead, you get to chew on a rock and hope your teeth hold up. You are an object of curiosity, and sometimes contempt. The older pirates watch you, their eyes narrowed. They are assessing you. Are you weak? Are you a liability? Will you run at the first sign of a Royal Navy frigate? They don't want a coward. Cowards waste valuable gunpowder and get everyone caught. This is not about kindness. It is about shared risk and economic self-interest. The greatest psychological pressure you face is the immense unspoken expectation that you will join them. You were captured, but to truly survive, you must publicly swear the oath and become one of them. The articles make it clear. Those who willingly sign are treated as equals. Those who refuse are little more than captives, forced to labor, and often the first to be sacrificed, either pushed over the side to lighten the load during a storm, or simply left in a port. You realize that your entire social and physical survival hinges on a single, silent decision. Choose the rope or the gallows. You watch a pirate who breaks one of the minor articles. He was caught hoarding extra rations of water. His punishment is decided not by Blackbeard, but by the quartermaster and a vote of the crew. He is not killed. He is given 30 lashes with the cat-o'-nine-tails, delivered with calm, professional efficiency on the main deck. You hear the sickening thwack of the lash against the skin. You don't look, but you hear the chilling sound, the grimness conveyed not through explicit gore, but through the sound of the consequence. You realize that this is not chaos. This is a system, a brutal, logical, self-policing system designed to maximize the longevity of the enterprise. You learn that Blackbeard himself is a calculated performer. You see him at a distance, a hulking figure with slow, deliberate movements. The stories of lit match cords woven into his beard, the bandolier of loaded pistols. These are tools of intimidation, used not just against victims, but against his own crew. He uses terror as a form of labor management. He doesn't have to shout or rage. His presence and the rumors surrounding him are enough. His primary weapon isn't the cutlass. It's the psychological dread he inflicts. You find yourself subtly anticipating his movement, constantly adjusting your posture to appear busy, but not rebellious. You are exhausted. Every muscle is shaking from the unceasing rocking and the heavy labor. You get perhaps 4 hours of sleep, wedged tightly between two men in the common crew space. The heat, the stink, and the sound of rats scurrying keep you in a state of low-grade perpetual tension. You look at your hands. They are already raw from the mop and the coarse ropes. You try to flex them. They don't respond well. You realize the relentless damp seeps into your very bones, promising you a lifetime of chronic aches, assuming you live that long. You notice the quiet paradoxes of your new life. Despite the rigid violence, there is an article that bans women and boys from the ship, specifically to prevent fighting over them, enforcing a strange, self-imposed social stability. You realize that pirate freedom is not a personal freedom, but a shared, carefully regulated form of collective anarchy. You are living it. You have survived the first shock of capture and begun to understand the strange social rules of your new, floating home. But knowing the rules is one thing. Enduring the conditions is another. The constant work, the lethal scarcity of basic resources, and the invisible threats of the sea are the real enemies. You have survived the initiation, but now you must survive the elements. Your body is already starting to give out, which brings you to the next silent killers you face. You survived the brutal social initiation of the first days, learning to navigate the strange laws and the terrifying presence of the quartermaster and Captain Teach. But as your body settles into the relentless, exhausting rhythm of the ship, you realize the greatest threats are not the cannons of the Royal Navy or the cutlasses of your shipmates. The real enemies are silent, invisible, and they are everywhere. They are the constant, lethal forces of disease, hunger, and crowding. The air you breathe is actively trying to kill you. Below decks, the ventilation is almost non-existent. The heat, even when sailing through northern latitudes, is stifling, created by the massed bodies of over 150 men crammed into a space designed for perhaps 80. This concentration of human life, packed into a damp, dark wooden box, creates a breeding ground for every fever, cough, and rash imaginable. You realize that your chances of dying from an invisible bacteria or a simple virus are 10 times higher than your chances of dying from a direct cannonball hit. The sanitation is non-existent. The smell that assaults your senses is a constant, suffocating reminder of this fact. Human waste is often simply tossed overboard, but below decks, bilge water pools. A thick, black, stagnant mixture of seawater, vomit, rat droppings, and human effluent. Every heavy wave that sloshes through the lower decks aerosolizes this filth, and you breathe it in constantly. You try to cup your hand over your mouth when climbing down to the lower decks, but the action is futile. The contamination is simply too pervasive. You watch men begin to fade, not with the dramatic violence of a knife fight, but with the quiet, agonizing slowness of typhus or yellow fever. They start with a simple headache, then a profound chill, and finally, they become delirious, consuming precious water rations and contaminating the communal living space. You must develop a cold, pragmatic calculus. Avoid the sick, but not so overtly that you appear cowardly or unhelpful, which would violate the pirate code. The most terrifying sight is not a skull and crossbones, but the vacant stare of a man who has succumbed to fever. You learn the grim, daily routine of identifying a body, stripping it of any useful possessions, a knife, a belt, a scrap of linen, and stitching it into a canvas sack before the sun rises. The ritual is swift, silent, and entirely devoid of emotion. The second silent killer is hunger. You quickly learn that pirate cuisine is defined by consistency, not quality. Your basic ration is salt beef and hardtack. The salt beef is exactly what it sounds like. Meat preserved with huge quantities of salt, rendering it palatable only because of its fat content and its durability. It's often so salty, it makes you painfully thirsty, and the water you have is never enough. You realize that your extreme thirst is a calculated design flaw. It makes you crave the rum, which the quartermaster controls. The hardtack, or ship's biscuit, is a flour and water mixture, baked until it's literally rock hard. It's meant to last years, not weeks. The downside: you must soak it in water, rum, or soup to make it chewable. And even then, it is often riddled with weevils, a small beetle. You quickly learn to ignore the tiny, crunchy protein supplement, realizing that complaining is a luxury you cannot afford. You chew the biscuits slowly, deliberately, focusing on the texture, trying to convince your stomach that it has received adequate sustenance. Your diet is fundamentally lacking in the one vital nutrient that keeps you alive: vitamin C. This leads directly to the third killer: scurvy. Scurvy is the sailor's true plague, and you begin to feel its slow, insidious onset. You notice small, purplish spots, petechiae, appearing on your skin, tiny bruises that appear for no reason. Your gums become spongy, inflamed, and bleed constantly. You may not be in a fight, but your mouth is perpetually filled with the metallic tang of your own blood. You try to brush your teeth with a scrap of rough canvas, but the effort only makes the bleeding worse. Your joints ache with a profound, bone-deep weariness that no sleep can cure. Even sitting still is painful. Then the psychological toll begins: confusion, listlessness, and a profound inability to feel anything but despair. You would kill for a single orange, a lemon, or even a potato, anything fresh. But those foods spoil. You are consuming your way into a slow, painful death, and the only medicine is the acidic taste of lime juice reserved only for the officers, or perhaps a meager ration of watered-down rum, which offers temporary distraction but no cure. You learn to rely on the momentary burn of the cheap liquor to mask the constant pain in your joints. You thought your exhaustion from labor was bad. Now you realize your exhaustion is compounded by deep systemic malnutrition. The energy you have is constantly draining away, making the heavy work of the day twice as difficult. Every time you climb the rigging, your muscles scream, and you wonder if this will be the moment the scurvy-weakened tendons in your fingers finally snap. The constant crowding further degrades your body and spirit. There is no personal space. You sleep in a communal area, sharing body heat and parasites with the man on either side of you. You are constantly brushing against another human being, another source of potential infection. The constant noise, the snoring, the muttered arguments, and the unavoidable physicality of 150 men living on top of one another means your mind never truly rests. You yearn for 5 minutes of silence, 5 minutes of being truly alone, but this ship offers no such luxury. This lack of privacy strips away the last remnants of your former self. You become a purely functional being, focused solely on the immediate tasks: finding dry footing, securing your small bit of rope for the night, and ensuring your ration isn't stolen. Every minor comfort is a tactical victory. Finding a dry piece of canvas to sleep on, or successfully skimming a small bit of fresh water when the quartermaster isn't looking. You realize the profound irony. The pirates risk their lives for wealth, yet they live worse than the poorest dock workers, constantly besieged by conditions that would hospitalize a merchant sailor. They have freedom, yes, but that freedom is constantly undermined by the absolute tyranny of their environment. You learn to hate the rain. While it brings a momentary respite from the heat, it means the deck becomes impossibly slippery, and every movement is a risk. Below decks, the rainwater pours through the seams, ensuring that your sleeping spot and your few possessions are permanently damp. The constant dampness leads to chronic skin infections and relentless, irritating itching. You realize that keeping dry is an impossible fantasy, You are permanently marinated in the sea, your own sweat, and the ship's foulness. Your focus shifts entirely to the basic necessities of survival. You become an expert at stretching your meager resources. You chew the salt beef slowly, maximizing the sensory experience. You use your rum ration not just for the buzz, but to clean small wounds, knowing that infection is the true executioner on this ship. You are an expert in survival biology, constantly monitoring your body for the early signs of collapse. You calculate the energy spent versus the calories consumed, always ending up with a terrifying negative number. You survived the social initiation and the violence, but you are slowly being consumed by the sea itself, by the lack of resources, and by the constant, invisible threats that lurk in the air and in your food. You are losing weight, your teeth ache, and your energy is failing. You must now prove that your muscle and skill are worth the cost of the meager rations you consume, which brings you to the relentless work required just to keep the Queen Anne's Revenge afloat. You have survived the initial shock of the pirate hierarchy, and you are currently weathering the slow, internal siege of disease and malnutrition. Now, you must endure the external, relentless pressure of manual labor. This ship, the formidable Queen Anne's Revenge, is a beast of wood and canvas, constantly fighting the ocean, and keeping it operational requires ceaseless, back-breaking work. You quickly realize that piracy is less about daring duels and swashbuckling, and more about the monotonous, bone-jarring grind of nautical maintenance. Your first official role is that of a common deckhand, though you are treated with the casual cruelty reserved for fresh recruits. Your duties are defined by the immediate, urgent needs of the ship, which are almost always heavy, wet, and high risk. Your arms and shoulders ache from the continuous task of hauling rigging. The sails of the Queen Anne's Revenge are vast and heavy, often soaked with seawater, and moving them to change course or catch the unpredictable Caribbean wind requires the coordinated effort of many men. You are constantly pulling thick, coarse hemp ropes. The salt water has chafed your hands raw, opening small, painful cuts that never fully dry or heal. You look at your palms, and they are already forming thick, dark calluses, but the raw skin beneath the calluses screams with every pull. You realize that your hands are no longer your own. They are merely tools for hauling canvas. You find yourself subtly looking for bits of salvaged leather to wrap around the rope, a small, practical act of self-preservation that could prevent a crippling infection. One of the most physically demanding and perpetually frustrating tasks is pumping the bilge. Every ship, particularly a large converted warship like Blackbeard's flagship, leaks constantly. Bilge water, that thick, foul mixture of seawater, sludge, and human effluent you learn to despise in Chapter 2, collects at the lowest point of the hull. If not pumped out constantly, it can rise high enough to spoil cargo, destabilize the ship, and accelerate decay. You spend agonizing shifts working the bilge pumps, a long, heavy lever that forces the water up and out. This task requires a monotonous, rhythmic, deep strength that uses every major muscle group: your core, your shoulders, your lower back. You push and pull, the lever straining against your chest and back. You sweat profusely in the dim, foul light, and the air around the pump stinks so powerfully it threatens to make you vomit. You realize the bilge pump is the heartbeat of the ship, and if the crew ever stopped pushing that handle, the ocean would simply swallow the Queen Anne's Revenge and everyone aboard. This quiet mechanical necessity underscores the profound reality of your situation. Your labor is not merely punishment, it is existence itself. The physical burn in your muscles is your proof of life. The danger of falling is omnipresent. You are required to climb the ratlines, the rope ladders, to reach the rigging high above the deck. A dizzying vertical climb on a ship pitching and rolling violently. You are moving dozens of feet above the unforgiving deck with no safety ropes and no sympathy for hesitation. Your grip must be absolute. The ropes are slippery, the wind is unpredictable, and one misstep means a fast, lethal plunge onto the hard planks below. You find yourself gripping the cold, rough, tarred ropes with a desperate, white-knuckle intensity, every muscle trembling with effort and controlled fear. You look down, once, and realize the figures below look like tiny, indifferent dolls. You never look down again. You learn the specific, bitter smell of the tar that coats the ropes, recognizing it as both a preservative for the line and a potential burn hazard for your skin. If you are assigned to the gun crew, the labor shifts from continuous hauling to frantic, terrifying bursts of immense strength. A single cannon on the Queen Anne's Revenge could weigh over 2 tons. Loading and maneuvering this beast requires synchronized, explosive effort. During a drill, or worse, an actual skirmish, you are tasked with fetching the heavy powder charge from the magazine, carrying the cannonball, and ramming the shot home. You push the heavy cannon carriage back into position, strain to haul the shot, and thrust the rammer home, all in a suffocating cloud of sulphurous smoke, deafening noise, and frantic motion. The weight of the equipment is crushing, and the speed required by the gun crew to maintain a continuous rate of fire is inhuman. You realize that the entire process is designed to push men past the point of exhaustion, because survival depends on firing one more round than the enemy. If you stumble or delay the reload, you don't just risk a beating, you risk the entire ship being sunk. The air tastes metallic from the fired gunpowder and the sea spray, a bitter taste you now associate with imminent risk. Your reward for this unrelenting labor is often pain. You suffer constant rope burns. Your knees and elbows are perpetually bruised from being slammed against bulkheads during rough seas, and your back develops a permanent, dull ache from the bilge pump. Sleep offers little respite. You try to rest, but your muscles twitch involuntarily from the fatigue, and the constant subtle motion of the ship prevents deep, restorative sleep. The 4 hours of sleep you get feel more like a light coma than actual rest. You spend hours meticulously scraping barnacles from the hull, a vital, dangerous task performed when the ship is careened in shallow water. You are essentially dangling over the side, hacking at stubborn sea life with a dull tool, surrounded by sharks and the threat of the ship rolling over and crushing you. The silence of the work, away from the chatter of the crew, is a unique, tense relief. But the constant, back-wrenching posture required to chip away at the tough shell makes your muscles seize up in agony. The most insidious work is the preventative maintenance. You are constantly retarring ropes, patching torn sails and caulking seams in the deck to stop leaks. This work is endless, repetitive, and dirty. You are forever smelling of pine tar, pitch, and beeswax. This attention to detail is the true secret of the pirate fleet. They can stay at sea longer than the Royal Navy because they have no rules about continuous maintenance. They simply do it until the job is done. Your life depends on the integrity of this cheap, sticky, unpleasant tar. There is a dark humor in the realization that your work schedule is significantly harder than any merchant marine or even the Royal Navy. The Royal Navy, with its vast manpower, could rotate crew more easily. Blackbeard's crew, smaller and constantly at sea, must be pushed harder, longer, and with less rest. You realize you have traded the tyranny of the monarchy for the tyranny of the tide and the tyranny of a shared, desperate economic enterprise. You learn to value the tools you use, the leverage of a well-balanced mop, the friction-reducing qualities of a block and tackle, the massive advantage of the pump handle. These are not enemies, but extensions of your own exhausted body. You treat your implements with quiet reverence, knowing that a broken tool means doubling your already unsustainable workload. You realize that your ability to endure this sheer volume of work is tied to your ability to disassociate. You perform the repetitive tasks, hauling, swabbing, pumping, while mentally detaching yourself from the effort. You focus on counting the ropes, monitoring the precise arc of the water coming from the pump, or memorizing the sequence of knots. You use this quiet, internal intellectual discipline to save your sanity, turning yourself into a human machine programmed for monotonous physical survival. The constant dampness further complicates the work. Every piece of wood is slippery, every rope is heavier when wet, and the sheer effort of simply staying upright increases exponentially in a storm. You are perpetually cold, perpetually wet, and perpetually exhausted. You have found a new baseline for existence, a baseline defined by extreme physical discomfort that your body is slowly, agonizingly adjusting to. This is the simple, brutal reality of life on a fighting ship. You have mastered the social code, endured the biological war, and now you have integrated yourself into the mechanical grind. But the true test of your survival lies in the moments when the grind stops and the fight begins. You've survived the social order, the disease, and the relentless grind of maintaining this floating prison. If you're still with me, you're tougher than most of Blackbeard's crew. Before we head into battle, take a moment, stretch, grab some water, and if you're finding value in this journey, that like button helps more than you might think. Now, let's see if you survived the hunt. You have become a functional cog in the great filthy machine of the Queen Anne's revenge. Your hands are calloused, your body is perpetually exhausted, and your mind is numb to the constant hunger and the threat of disease. You have endured the relentless grind of maintenance. Now, you must face the purpose of the ship, the hunt. The transition from monotonous sailing to frantic combat is violently sudden. You might be engaged in the tedious work of coiling rope when the cry of the crow's nest cuts through the air, sharp and electrifying. Sail! The entire atmosphere shifts instantly from dull fatigue to hyper-alert tension. The previous day's arguments over rum rations and the fear of scurvy are instantly forgotten, replaced by the immediate, crystalline focus of the chase. Captain Teach, the man who was often slow and deliberate, becomes terrifyingly focused. He is in command, giving rapid, sharp orders to the master and the boatswain. You realize the prey is often a slower, heavier merchant vessel, a sugar ship from the West Indies, or a large slaver, and the pirates rely entirely on their superior speed and the element of surprise. The Queen Anne's revenge is fast, heavily armed, and its very reputation is the first strike. Your role in the attack is critical and horrifying. If you are on the gun crew, the chaos is deafening. The deck becomes a nightmare of smoke, noise, and frantic movement. You strain to haul the heavy cannon into position, fighting the recoil of the previous shot. The heat from the barrels is scorching, and the powder smoke stings your eyes and chokes your lungs. You are working in a state of controlled panic, knowing that a slow reload can mean a successful countershot from the enemy that could dismember your crew and ruin the entire enterprise. The sheer volume of the noise, the roar of the cannon, the splintering wood, the screams, is physically painful, vibrating in your skull long after the battle ends. You focus intently on the rammer, pushing the charge home with ruthless efficiency, because speed means survival. But Blackbeard's true weapon, and the key to your survival, is terror. You are witness to the calculated application of psychological warfare. Just before engaging, Blackbeard will make his presence known. You see him on the quarterdeck, performing his ritual. He often dresses in a terrifying spectacle, wearing multiple pistols and cutlasses draped across his chest, and, most famously, executing the slow, deliberate act of lighting those thin, fused match cords and tucking them under the brim of his hat, or weaving them into his vast, dark beard. The visual effect is immediate and profound, smoke and fire curling around the face of a hulking giant. This is theatre, but it is effective theatre. The purpose is not to fight the merchant ship, but to demoralize it instantly. The moment the merchant captain sees that spectre of fire and smoke, he often strikes his colours, surrenders, immediately. A surrendered ship means no sustained battle, no damage to the Queen Anne's revenge, and minimal risk to your own life. You realise the sheer efficiency of calculated savagery. The terror saves your life and the ship's timbers, making the violence economically viable. If the ship surrenders, the next phase is the boarding. This is the most dangerous part of the job. You climb over the railings, cutlass or axe in hand, adrenaline overriding your exhaustion. The fight is usually short, brutal, and asymmetrical. You are moving fast, surrounded by screaming men. Your greatest fear is not the enemy sailor, but the chaotic, unpredictable movement of your own shipmates in the tight space. A wild swing from a friend could be just as lethal as a determined thrust from a foe. The smell of fear is palpable, mixing with the scent of fresh splinters and spent gunpowder. The aftermath of a successful capture shifts instantly from violence to bureaucracy. The quartermaster immediately takes charge. He is not interested in revenge or drunken celebration. He is interested in plunder. Every item of value is meticulously recorded and brought back to the Queen Anne's Revenge. You are tasked with gathering and inspecting the loot. You realize that piracy is an exercise in applied economics. They only take items with high value-to-weight ratios: gold, silver coinage, small jewels, indigo, fine spices, and, most importantly, sugar and cocoa, which are highly valuable trade goods. They rarely bother with bulky, heavy items like cheap tobacco or massive quantities of timber. The pirates are not interested in the ship itself, only its monetary worth. The most critical moment is the share-out. This is governed strictly by the Articles. Every man is entitled to his share, provided he has followed the rules. The Articles ensure fairness to prevent internal rebellion. The captain, the quartermaster, and the officers receive a set number of extra shares, e.g., the captain gets 2 shares, the quartermaster 1.5, but the ordinary sailor, you, gets a full share. This system, while brutal, is far more equitable than the meagre wages and harsh docking of pay common in the Royal Navy. You realize the profound meaning of that share. It is not just money. It is your payment for risking death, disease, and the gallows. It represents the only true wealth you have ever accumulated. You watch as the quartermaster meticulously weighs the hacksilver, cut pieces of silver coinage, and gold dust, using a small, precise balance on the gun deck. He is meticulous, fair, and utterly ruthless against anyone trying to cheat. But what if you are injured? The Pirate Code addresses this with brutal clarity. The surgeon's share is an article stipulating fixed compensation for those maimed in battle, often paid before the general distribution of loot. If you lose a hand or an arm, you are entitled to a massive lump sum, perhaps 600 pieces of 8. If you lose a finger or an eye, a smaller, still significant sum. You watch a man who lost an eye in the last skirmish receiving his full designated payout, effectively retiring him from the life of piracy and guaranteeing his survival on land. This is the dark humor of pirate compassion. They value a man's future more if he's crippled than if he's whole, simply to maintain the morale and integrity of the system. The sheer volume of rum and wine taken from the captured ship often leads to the inevitable celebration, a period of temporary, chaotic release where the strict rules temporarily loosen. You drink the purloined spirits, the burn of the high-quality rum, a stunning contrast to the thin, sour water you normally consume. For one night, the fear fades, replaced by reckless abandon. But even in the deepest revelry, you maintain a sober edge, observing who drinks too much, who boasts too loudly, and who might become a liability in the morning. You have survived the initial taste of battle, and you hold a small, heavy pouch of silver coins, your first share. You realize that you are now officially complicit. You are not just a captive, you are a pirate, bound by blood, silver, and the fear of the gallows. The Royal Navy will not make a distinction. You have taken wealth, and you have risked everything, but your greatest risk is yet to come. The moment Blackbeard, the ultimate gambler, decides to fold his hand. You are a pirate now. You have bloodied your cutlass, you have endured the grind, and you clutch a small, heavy pouch of silver, your share of the plunder. The Royal Navy makes no distinction between a reluctant recruit and a ruthless freebooter. You are marked for the gallows, a fate that awaits every man who sails under the black flag. But your captain, Edward Teach, is not merely a common criminal. He is a gambler, and the year is 1718. The seas are choked with piracy, and the British Crown, exhausted by the cost of the War of the Spanish Succession, is desperate to regain control of the trade routes without bankrupting the treasury on endless naval pursuits. This desperation gives rise to the most complicated, seductive, and terrifying risk of all: the Act of Grace, or the Royal Pardon. Word travels slowly but inevitably through the maritime network. King George I has offered a general amnesty to all pirates who surrender themselves and their ships before a specific deadline. The promise is absolute immunity for all past crimes committed before January 1718, provided they never return to piracy. This news sends a chilling tremor through the Queen Anne's Revenge. For weeks, the atmosphere is thick with suspicion and calculation. Every man, including you, faces a profound existential choice: continue the life of reckless wealth and guaranteed death, or accept the pardon and return to the dreary, meagre existence of an honest sailor, but with your life intact. You watch the older men, the true veterans of the trade, weigh the options. They are too accustomed to power and wealth to return to wage slavery, but they are also weary of the constant chase. Blackbeard, the ultimate pragmatist and economic realist, decides to fold his hand. He knows the jig is up, the Royal Navy is massing forces, and the pardon is a strategic gift. However, he does not simply sail into port and divide the wealth. He executes a brilliant, cynical, and ruthless maneuver to maximize his personal assets and minimize the number of men he has to share them with. First, he decides to wreck the Queen Anne's Revenge near Topsail Inlet, modern Beaufort. You are witness to the calculated act of betrayal. He deliberately runs the massive flagship aground on a sandbar. You feel the gut-wrenching shudder as the hull scrapes and lodges firmly into the sand. In the manufactured chaos of the accident, he and his inner circle plunder the ship, claiming salvage rights over the richest cargo and the most valuable silver, leaving the majority of the crew to deal with the inevitable loss of the ship and the loss of their share of the true riches. You are abandoned, or more accurately, disposed of. Teach knows that if he surrenders with over 100 men, the wealth must be divided too thinly. By stranding the ship, he effectively cuts the crew down to a manageable, loyal 40 or so men. You find yourself among the 30 or 40 men left stranded, knowing the wreck was a cynical, calculated move. This betrayal burns with a cold intensity, hardening your resolve. You can only trust yourself. You manage to secure passage on a small sloop and make it to Bath, North Carolina, a shabby, humid haven where the royal pardon is being issued. The experience is surreal. You walk ashore, your heart pounding like a drum, surrounded by men who were pirates yesterday and are now simply poor, suspicious civilians. The moment you stand before the local magistrate and sign the papers, swearing allegiance to the crown, you feel a profound, strange sensation. The sheer physical stress of being actively hunted is gone, but it is immediately replaced by the immense psychological tension of being hunted by your own past. You are a freed man, but you are not safe. The social stigma is a suffocating blanket. No honest merchant will hire you. No landlord trusts you. You have a handful of silver coins from your plunder, but spending them conspicuously is an invitation for trouble. You realize that everyone in Bath knows who you are. The shopkeeper sees a former pirate. The royal governor sees a potential backslider. The children stare at you in wide-eyed, fascinated terror. The paranoia is chronic. Every new ship that arrives in the harbour might carry a bounty hunter or a disgruntled former shipmate looking to betray you for a reward. You constantly scan the faces around you, looking for the telltale scar or the familiar swagger of a man who knows too much about your time on the Queen Anne's Revenge. You realize the most immediate threat to your life is no longer the Royal Navy, but betrayal from one of your own kind, the men you fought beside. The reward money for a backsliding pirate is far more lucrative than any honest job. You learn of Blackbeard's own fate after claiming the pardon. He used his amnesty as a cynical shield, marrying a local girl and pretending to retire, all while quietly continuing small-scale piracy under the guise of trading in the protected, quiet waters of North Carolina. This open contempt for the law and the pardon infuriates the authorities and solidifies your own sense of constant, low-grade fear. You realize the pardon is only as good as the political forces defending it. The temptation to return to sea, to feel the familiar rhythm of the deck and the easy wealth of piracy, is a constant, gnawing temptation. Land life is hard, restrictive, and unforgiving. You struggle to find honest work, forced to take jobs no one else will touch, cleaning fish docks or clearing dense swampland in the suffocating heat of North Carolina. The honest wages are a pathetic joke compared to a single night's plunder. This economic desperation pushes countless pardoned men back to the dark water. You watch them go, their faces showing relief mixed with self-loathing. You must resist that same pull. You must choose to disappear. You cannot stay in the recognizable ports. You take your remaining silver and vanish into the American colony's interior, cutting yourself off from the sea, the only life you truly know. You realize that your only path to long-term survival is complete, utter anonymity. You adopt a new name, affect a dull manner, and work tirelessly to erase every trace of the sailor, the fighter, and the pirate you became. You deliberately choose a life of dullness, knowing that excitement is synonymous with the gallows. The royal pardon was not a ticket to paradise. It was a contract for perpetual paranoia, a trade-off of high risk, quick death for low risk, long-term dread. You survived the battle and the disease, but now you must survive the quiet, unforgiving judgment of society, which never truly forgives the man who once sailed under the black flag. Your existence is defined by silence and the constant, cold fear of recognition. You have survived the most terrifying gauntlet of the pirate life. The ocean crossing, the disease, the back-breaking labor, the fight, and the political betrayal of the royal pardon. You chose the path of retreat, taking your few coins and vanishing into the humid obscurity of colonial North Carolina, determined to live out your days in anonymity. But there is a law that governs all pirates, regardless of pardons or promises. The reckoning. You might hide, but the sea, the law, and the inexorable march of power will eventually find you. The year is late 1718. You are living a simple, miserable life, perhaps clearing swampland or working for honest and miserly wages in a small coastal settlement like Bath. The heat is oppressive, the mosquitoes are relentless, and the honest work is crushing in its banality compared to the wild freedom you once tasted. You find yourself constantly scanning the horizon, listening for news, and checking the faces of strangers. The constant, low level. Dread is worse than the occasional sharp fear of battle. The attention of the authorities has focused entirely on your former captain, Blackbeard. His cynical abuse of the royal pardon, using his status as a cloak for continued minor piracy, has infuriated the colonial governors, particularly Alexander Spotswood of Virginia. Spotswood correctly views Blackbeard not as a nuisance, but as a direct threat to the very structure of the British Empire in the Americas. Spotswood takes a decisive, ruthless action. He hires 2 small armed sloops and places them under the command of Lieutenant Maynard of the Royal Navy, giving him secret orders to hunt down and kill Blackbeard, bypassing the corrupt North Carolina governor entirely. The news of Maynard's approach travels like a whispered fever. You hear the rumors in the taverns, 2 small ships, heavily armed, manned by fierce, non-pirate sailors. The knowledge chills you to the bone. Maynard's orders are simple, no quarter. His arrival signifies the end of the pirate game in North Carolina. You realize you must choose your fate again, Do you flee inland, abandoning your meager possessions? Or do you stay, hoping your low profile protects you? For the men still with Teach, there is only one option. Teach has anchored his final 2 small sloops, the Adventure and a small Spanish prize, in the shallow waters of Ocracoke Inlet. It's a strategic move. The shoals and sandbars protect him from large warships. It is here that he and his remaining crew, a mix of loyalists and those too reckless to take the pardon, are making their final stand, drinking and carousing, in a defiant, deadly celebration of their lawlessness. On the morning of November 22nd, 1718, Maynard's 2 sloops, the Ranger and the Jane, find Blackbeard. You receive the news later, but the psychological impact of that day is absolute. The battle is a brutal, chaotic, close-quarters affair fought in the shallow water. Maynard's plan relies on deception and daring. As his ships approach, they run aground in the shallows. Teach, confident in the depth advantage, orders his cannons to fire. The first broadside is devastating, crippling one of Maynard's sloops and killing several men. This is the moment of raw, terrifying power. Teach believes he has won. He orders his men to board Maynard's sloop, the Jane, to finish the job. He leads the charge, the monstrous figure you know so well, plumes of smoke curling from his beard, a cutlass in one hand and a pistol in the other. But Maynard has prepared a final, fatal trap. He has hidden most of his men below decks, leaving only a few on the deck to draw Teach and his party into a small, confined space. The moment Blackbeard and his pirates jump aboard, Maynard's men spring from the hold. The deck of the Jane turns into a horrifying abattoir. You hear the details whispered in every tavern. The terrible, prolonged duel between Maynard and Blackbeard. Teach, fighting with the reckless fury of a dying god, sustained multiple gunshot wounds and dozens of cutlass slashes. Maynard, fighting with the cold discipline of the Royal Navy, eventually prevails. The reports say Blackbeard was shot 5 times and cut 20 times before he finally fell. The moment of his death marks the definitive end of the golden age of piracy. The aftermath is swift and absolute. Maynard takes the surviving pirates captive and, in a gruesome display, cuts off Blackbeard's head, hanging it from the bowsprit of the Jane as a grim trophy. The remaining pirates are taken to Williamsburg, Virginia. The news of this event settles over the colony with the cold finality of winter. The royal pardon is now worthless. The fate of the captured men is sealed, a swift trial and the gallows. You know that the final walk is the ultimate humiliation. You imagine the sight, the condemned men, perhaps 6 or 7 of them, standing on the cart, the noose already placed around their neck. The crowd is silent, watching the end of the lawless men. The local officials read the decree. Then the cart is pulled away. The pirates are left to dance their final terrible jig, their bodies swaying for days as a permanent, morbid reminder of the price of piracy. This vision, detailed and inescapable, defines your life now. You realize the immense, impossible luck of having chosen to abandon the Queen Anne's revenge and claim that flawed pardon. You are alive, while the most fearsome man you ever knew is a head mounted on a stick. Your survival is no longer about fighting the tide or scurvy. It is about absolute, perpetual self-effacement. You must never draw attention. You must become a ghost. You cut your hair, shave your beard, and abandon your sailor's gait. You speak with a new, quiet reserve, erasing every trace of the aggressive, quick-witted pirate you had to become to survive. You spend your silver meticulously, using it only for the most basic necessities, a small piece of land, a few rough tools, and a reliable horse to flee if necessary. You realize that your life is now a long, patient waiting game, hoping the sea never calls you back and the law never remembers your name. You have survived the battle, the betrayal, and the sickness. Your final victory is the quiet, miserable anonymity of a man who simply exists on the edge of the map. A man who knows the exact cost of freedom and the final, brutal price of rebellion. You look at the small map of the Carolina coast, traced in your mind, and you mentally mark the location of Ocracoke Inlet, the place where the game ended. You survived, but you will never truly be free of the sounds, the smells, or the fear of that life. The heat of the coastal town, the perpetual humidity of the American colonies, slowly fades. You open your eyes. You're home. The cold, gnawing hunger that defined your every waking moment is gone. The blinding violence of the cannon fire, the stink of the bilge, and the cold, constant fear of the quartermaster's gaze. It has all lifted. You survived. You pull your hand out from beneath the pillow. It is soft, clean, and uncalloused, not the rough, scarred, perpetually raw instrument of a pirate deckhand. You survived the North Sea crossing, the grind of the pump, and the chaotic violence of the boarding party. You endured the silent siege of disease and the terrifying, calculated betrayal of Blackbeard and the King's pardon. If this journey moved you, or if you survived alongside our nameless pirate, consider leaving a like. It helps others find these stories. And if you want more deep dives into history's darkest corners, you know where the subscribe button is. You look around the safety of your room. You are warm, safe, and utterly, unthinkably free. A luxury the tens of thousands of common sailors and pirates rarely achieved. Your survival was a statistical anomaly, purchased with incredible endurance, calculated risk, and the willingness to abandon your past life entirely. Sleep well. You've earned the rest that the men who fell on the deck of the Jane or swung from the gibbet at Williamsburg never received. Your shadow is gone. They rarely vanish so easily.